She woke up because something felt wrong. Not loud, not obvious, just enough to pull her out of sleep. For a second she stayed still, listening, trying to convince herself it was nothing. Then she noticed the door. It wasn't closed anymore. And that quiet thought hit her before anything else. Someone was inside. That night started like any other. There was nothing unusual about the house, nothing that would suggest anything was about to happen. It was quiet, the kind of quiet people don't notice until something breaks it. Jayme had gone to sleep, and for a while everything was normal. At some point during the night, something changed. It wasn't a loud crash or a scream. It was smaller than that, the kind of sound most people would ignore or explain away, but it was enough to wake her up. She opened her eyes and stayed still for a moment, trying to figure out what she had heard. The house felt different. Not in a way you could immediately explain, but enough that it made her pay attention. She listened. Nothing. Then she noticed the door. It wasn't closed anymore. That's when the situation shifted from confusion to something much more serious, because a door doesn't open by itself in the middle of the night. She turned toward the hallway, trying to see if there was anyone there. At first it was hard to make anything out. The light was low, the shapes unclear. Then she saw movement. Not fast, not obvious, just enough to understand that someone was standing there. Inside the house. That realization didn't take long to settle in. Whoever it was, they weren't supposed to be there. She got up quickly. Not thinking about what to do next, just reacting to the fact that she needed to get out of that room. She moved toward the exit, but before she could get past him, he stepped forward and blocked the way. There was no conversation. No warning. Just the sudden understanding that she wasn't leaving. She tried to get around him anyway. A quick movement, a change of direction, anything that might give her space. It didn't work. He was already where she needed to go. At that point, it became physical. He grabbed her arm and held on, and the moment that happened, there was no more uncertainty about what was going on. She tried to pull away. She twisted, tried to break his grip, but it only made her lose balance. She fell. For a second she tried to push herself back up, to get distance, but he didn't give her that chance. The front door was already open. Cold air was coming in from outside, and beyond it there was nothing visible, just darkness. He pulled her up and moved her toward the exit. She reached for the wall as she was being dragged forward, trying to hold on to anything that might slow things down, but there was nothing she could keep a grip on. Within seconds, she was outside. There were no nearby lights, no clear signs of anyone else being around. The house was already behind her. And whatever control she had left in that moment was gone. That was the point where the situation fully turned, from something confusing into something she couldn't stop. After he took Jayme out of the house, everything moved quickly, and within seconds she was already inside the car while he got in and drove off. At first, Jayme tried to follow where they were going, watching the road and paying attention to turns, hoping she could remember something later. That didn't last long. The area changed, and nothing outside looked familiar anymore. Jayme shifted slightly toward the window, trying to see more without making it obvious, but there was nothing useful to hold on to. Just darkness and the reflection of her own face. Her breathing was still uneven, and even when she tried to slow it down, it didn't stay steady for long. The door handle was right next to her, and she noticed it more than once, thinking about what would happen if she tried to open it. She didn't move. The car was still going too fast, and she knew one mistake could make everything worse. He didn't say anything the entire time, and that silence made the situation harder to understand. Jayme had no way of knowing what was coming next. After a while, the car slowed down, and she felt the change before she clearly saw it. The road wasn't smooth anymore. They had left the main road. Jayme leaned closer to the window, trying to figure out where they were, but there were no houses nearby and no lights she could use. The area felt completely isolated. The car kept moving for a short distance and then came to a stop. There was no sudden movement. It just stopped. For a moment, nothing happened, and then the engine turned off. He got out. Jayme stayed inside for a few seconds, thinking if there was anything she could still do, but she already knew there wasn't. Her door opened, and cold air hit her immediately while he grabbed her arm and pulled her out. Her feet hit uneven ground, and she had to adjust quickly just to stay balanced. Jayme looked around, trying to find anything that might help, but there was nothing there. No lights. No houses. Nothing that suggested anyone was nearby. He didn't stop moving and kept her close while guiding her forward. Jayme tried to pull away once, but it didn't change anything, and his grip tightened just enough to stop her. Ahead of them, she could see a building. Small, standing on its own, with no lights and nothing around it. By the time Jayme understood where they were already at the door. He opened it and led her inside. Inside, Jayme noticed how small the space was, and that hit her immediately. There wasn't much in the room, but that was exactly the problem, because it meant there was nothing she could really use. The door closed behind them, and that sound stayed with her longer than it should have. He didn't say anything. He just moved her further inside and stayed close enough to stop anything before it even started. Jayme didn't react right away, not because she didn't want to, but because there wasn't a clear move she could make yet. She looked around, trying to understand the layout and how far the door actually was. It wasn't far. But it wasn't reachable either. He stayed near her the whole time, watching, adjusting, making sure she stayed exactly where he wanted her. Jayme stood still for a moment, thinking if there was anything she could try immediately, but nothing made sense yet. So she waited. Then looked again. Slower this time, more focused, trying to notice something she had missed the first time. Nothing changed, and that made it worse, because it meant the situation wasn't going to shift on its own. After a while, the panic didn't disappear, but it changed, and that was the moment Jayme stopped reacting and started thinking. She began watching him instead. How he moved. When he turned. How much space he left. Those details started to matter. At one point, Jayme made a small movement, just enough to see how he would react, and the response came immediately. That told her everything. There was no room for mistakes. She stopped again, adjusted, and understood that forcing something too early would only make things worse. From that point on, everything came down to waiting and watching, trying to understand if there was any kind of pattern she could use. Jayme kept looking for something, anything that might create an opportunity, but nothing came easily. The room stayed the same, and he stayed in control the entire time, without giving her a real chance to try anything. The longer it went on, the clearer it became that this had been planned, and that meant she would have to wait for the right moment. Because timing was the only thing she had left. Jayme stayed still for a moment, watching him closely and trying to understand exactly where he was standing and how much space there was between them. She shifted her weight slightly so it wouldn't look obvious, just enough to feel the ground and see how stable her footing was. He noticed the movement and adjusted, not dramatically, but enough to close the gap and remind her how little room she actually had. Jayme didn't move again right away, and instead waited a few seconds before briefly looking toward the door and then back at him, checking if that alone would trigger a reaction. It didn't. She tried again later, this time stepping just a little to the side as if she was adjusting her stance, keeping it slow so it wouldn't stand out. He reacted faster that time and shifted into her path. That told her what she needed. Jayme stopped, reset, and stayed still again, but now she had a better idea of how quickly he could respond and from which direction. She let time pass and didn't rush it, because forcing a move too early would only make things worse. At one point, he shifted his attention away for a second, not completely, but enough to change how he was standing. Jayme noticed it immediately and watched carefully to see if it would happen again. It did, in the same way. She adjusted her position slightly, turning her body just enough to keep the movement natural while still testing the space. He didn't react that time. That was different. Jayme tested it again with a small step, controlled and steady, watching him the entire time. He reacted, but there was a slight delay. Not much, but enough to matter. Jayme stopped again and didn't push it further, because she needed to be sure before trying anything bigger. A few seconds later, it happened again. The same shift. The same delay. Jayme moved. Faster this time, but still controlled, aiming for the side she had been watching. He reacted immediately, but he had to turn first, and that gave her a fraction of space she didn't have before. Jayme used it and tried to pull away, but he caught her again before she could get past him. It didn't work. Not completely. But it showed her something important. There was a moment where he wasn't fully set. Jayme stopped fighting right away and let the movement end, because pushing further would only close that gap again. He pulled her back, closer this time, and tightened control. Jayme didn't resist. She stayed still, breathing heavier now, but keeping it controlled. She looked toward the same space again, measured the distance, and waited. Now she knew. The next attempt would have to be timed better, because that short delay was the only opening she had. This time felt different, not because anything around her had changed, but because Jayme understood exactly what she was looking for. It wasn't the first attempt. But it was the first one where everything started to line up the way it needed to. Jayme stayed still and kept watching him, focusing on the same small delay she had noticed before. She didn't rush it. She waited. A few seconds passed, and then it happened again. The same shift. The same movement. Jayme saw it and held for just a moment longer to be sure. Then she moved. Faster than before and without hesitation, going in the same direction she had already tested, but this time committing fully to it. He reacted immediately. But he had to turn first. That was enough. Jayme pulled away and pushed forward without slowing down, using that brief space to get past him before he could close it again. For a moment, it worked. She got through. Jayme reached the door and opened it, and before he could grab her again, she was already outside. She didn't stop. She ran. The ground wasn't stable, but it didn't matter. Jayme kept moving, putting distance between herself and the building as fast as she could. She didn't look back. Not once. After a short distance, she saw someone. Jayme went straight toward them, not slowing down, and within seconds she was no longer alone. That was enough. Everything shifted after that. Help came quickly, and the situation that had been completely controlled only moments earlier was no longer in his hands. Jayme was safe. And just like that, it was over. What started in silence ended differently. This time, it ended with someone there. And that changed everything.